The morning sky on Kepler 442b was the color of pale green tea, just like every other morning for the past 300 years. Commander Veltar stepped out onto his office balcony and breathed in the sweet air that smelled of flowering vines and crystal streams. His blue skin caught the gentle light of their distant sun as he watched the mining crews prepare for another peaceful day of work. The Zilani colony had never known violence. Their people were builders and dreamers, not fighters. They grew food in vast gardens that stretched across the valleys, mined precious metals with care not to harm the planet, and spent their evenings creating beautiful art that told stories of hope and harmony. War was something they read about in old history books, a terrible thing that their ancestors had left behind when they reached for the stars. Veltar adjusted his simple work clothes and walked back into the administrative building. The walls were made of local white stone that seemed to glow from within, decorated with paintings that showed scenes of children playing and families sharing meals. Everything about their world spoke of peace and contentment. "Good morning, Commander," called Zaralyn from her desk near the communication console. Her pale blue fingers danced across the controls as she checked the daily reports from the outer settlements. The mining teams report that they found another rich vein of crystal ore in Sector 7. Production is ahead of schedule again. Veltar smiled and poured himself a cup of warm berry juice from the pot that always sat ready on the side table. "Excellent news. Send my congratulations to the team leaders. Their hard work makes life better for everyone." The Zilani way of life was simple and good. They worked together, shared everything they had, and never took more than they needed. Their technology was advanced but gentle, designed to help rather than harm. Their cities were small and green, filled with parks and gardens where families could gather. Crime was almost unknown, and the idea of one person hurting another was so foreign that they barely had words for such things. That morning, like every morning, seemed perfect and safe. The first sign of trouble came at exactly 11:30 local time. Zaralyn looked up from her console with confusion written across her delicate features. "Commander, I'm picking up some strange signals from the outer edge of our system. Multiple ships, but they're not broadcasting proper identification codes." Veltar set down his juice and walked over to look at the display screen. The dots of light showing the unknown ships made him feel uneasy, though he couldn't say why. In 3 centuries, every visitor to their world had been friendly. Merchants, explorers, scientists, and diplomats had all come in peace. "Try to contact them," he said. "Maybe their communication equipment is damaged." Zaralyn worked at her console, sending out standard greeting messages on all the common frequencies. The response that came back made both of them freeze with terror they had never known before. A harsh, growling voice filled the room, speaking in the common galactic language but with an accent that sounded like grinding metal and breaking bones. "Peaceful colony of Kepler 442b. This is War Leader Grextok of the Korthek raiding fleet. We have come to take what we want from your world. Surrender now and some of you may live to serve us. Resist, and all will die." Veltar's blue skin turned even paler as the meaning of the words sank in. The Korthek were legends of terror that parents sometimes used to frighten naughty children into good behavior. They were supposed to be myths, stories from the old days when the galaxy was wilder and more dangerous. "This cannot be real," he whispered, but even as he spoke, the first explosions began to light up the sky. The Korthek ships descended from orbit like falling stars, but instead of bringing wishes, they brought destruction. The first target was the orbital communication station that connected the colony to the rest of the galaxy. It died in a ball of fire that could be seen from the ground, taking with it their ability to call for help from the Galactic Federation. Minutes, smaller Korthek fighters were screaming through the atmosphere, their engines leaving trails of black smoke against the peaceful green sky. They attacked the power stations first, then the transportation hubs, methodically cutting the colony off from everything it needed to function. Veltar watched in horror as reports flooded in from all over the planet. The Korthik were not just raiders, they were experts at conquest. They knew exactly how to break a peaceful society by hitting its most vital systems first. "Commander," Zaralyn called out, her voice shaking with fear she had never felt before. "They're landing troops near the main settlement. Thousands of them." The Korthak warriors were nightmares made real. They stood nearly 8 feet tall on powerful legs that ended in clawed feet. Their reptilian skin was covered with scars and metal implants that made them look more like machines than living beings. Each one carried weapons that could level buildings, and they moved with the confidence of predators who had never met anything they couldn't kill. The first group of Zilani civilians they encountered tried to run. The Korthik caught them easily, their cybernetic enhancements making them faster and stronger than any natural creature had a right to be. What happened next was too terrible for Veltar to watch, but he forced himself to keep looking at the security feeds. His people needed him to witness their suffering, even if he could do nothing to stop it. "Sir," Zaralyn whispered, tears streaming down her blue cheeks, "what do we do? We don't have any weapons. We don't have any soldiers. We don't even know how to fight." Veltar closed his eyes and tried to think. The emergency protocols they had learned in school were useless against an enemy like this. They were designed for accidents and natural disasters, not for beings who seemed to enjoy causing pain and fear. "Send out the distress signal," he finally said. "Use the emergency beacon. It has enough power to reach the nearest galactic peacekeeping post." Zaralyn's fingers flew over the controls as another explosion shook the building. Dust fell from the ceiling as she activated the emergency broadcast system that had never been used for its intended purpose in 300 years of peace. "This is Commander Veltar of the Zilani colony on Kepler 442b. He spoke into the microphone, trying to keep his voice steady as the sounds of destruction grew louder outside. "We are under attack by Korthak raiders. We have no military forces and cannot defend ourselves. There are civilians trapped throughout the colony. We need immediate assistance. This is a code-red emergency. Please, if anyone can hear this message, help us." The signal raced out into space at the speed of light, carrying with it the desperate hope of a peaceful people who had never learned to fight. Veltar did not know that the nearest station to receive his call was not operated by the gentle peacekeepers he expected, but by a species that had grown up on a world where everything was designed to kill them. The children of Earth were about to receive their first distress call from the galaxy they had recently joined. They would answer it in the only way they knew how. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the emergency alarm started screaming through the corridors of Outpost Delta 7. The human base was small compared to the massive Federation stations, but it was built like a fortress. Every wall was reinforced steel, every door could seal against attack, and every room had backup power systems that could run for months. Jake set down his coffee mug and headed for the command center. His boots made sharp sounds on the metal floor as he walked through hallways lined with weapons lockers and emergency supplies. The other crew members were already moving to their battle stations, their faces serious but not panicked. They had all been soldiers before they became space explorers. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez was bent over the communication console when Jake arrived. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her brown eyes were focused on the scrolling text that filled her screen. She had been a Navy communications officer before joining the Deep Space program, and she could decode alien signals faster than anyone else in the human fleet. "What do we have, Rodriguez?" Jake asked, settling into his command chair. "Distress. Call from Kepler 442b, Captain. The message is in basic galactic standard, but the translation software is having trouble with some of the words. The beings calling themselves Zilani are under attack by something called the Korthak. They say they have no weapons and no way to defend themselves. Jake pulled up the star charts on his main display. Kepler 442b was only 8 hours away at maximum speed, but it was also right on the edge of unexplored space. The human fleet had been in this part of the galaxy for less than 6 months, and they were still learning about the various alien species that lived here. Any Federation ships in the area? He asked. Amy shook her head. The nearest peacekeeping fleet is 3 days out, sir. We're the only ones who can reach them in time to help. Jake studied the tactical display showing the USS Tempest and her crew of 45. The ship was not large by galactic standards, but it was built according to human military specifications. That meant it was tough, fast, and carried enough firepower to level a small city. Every human ship was built for war, because that was the only kind of ship that could survive in the hostile environment around Earth. All hands to battle stations, Jake announced over the intercom. We have a rescue mission. This is not a drill. The crew of the USS Tempest moved with practiced efficiency. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Pete Jackson began bringing the fusion reactors to full power. The ship's weapons systems came online as Weapons Officer Carl Davis ran diagnostics on the railguns and missile tubes. In the medical bay, Dr. Helen Carter prepared for casualties, while Sergeant Lisa Parker gathered her Marine squad for a possible ground assault. Captain, called out Navigator Tom Williams from his station, I've plotted a course for Kepler 442b. We can be there in 7 hours and 53 minutes if we push the engines to maximum. Do it, Jake ordered. And send a message to Earth. Command, tell them we're responding to a distress call and may need backup. The USS Tempest leaped into hyperspace with a flash of blue light. The ship's hull groaned under the stress of maximum acceleration, but the human engineers had built it to handle far worse punishment. Every bolt and weld had been tested against the kind of forces that would tear apart most alien vessels. 8 hours later, the Tempest dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. The sight that greeted them made Jake's jaw tighten with anger. A massive alien warship was orbiting the planet, its dark hull bristling with weapons. Smaller ships moved between the surface and the main vessel like ants, carrying food back to their nest. Scan that big ship, Jake ordered. I want to know what we're dealing with. Amy worked at her console, using the Tempest's powerful sensors to examine the enemy vessel. It's nearly twice our size, Captain. Heavy armor, energy shields, and enough weapons to flatten a city. The design is unlike anything in our databases. What about the smaller ships, fighters and landing craft? They appear to be moving prisoners from the surface to the main ship. Sir, there are thousands of life signs on that vessel, and most of them are not showing the same biological patterns as the crew. Jake felt a cold rage building in his chest. The aliens were not just raiding the planet, they were taking slaves. On Earth, slavery had been abolished centuries ago, but apparently, some parts of the galaxy had not learned that lesson yet. Hail them, he ordered. The face that appeared on the main screen was something from a nightmare. The alien's reptilian features were covered in scars and metal implants. His eyes glowed with a red light that seemed to come from cybernetic replacements. And his mouth was filled with teeth that looked like they could bite through steel. Unknown vessel, the creature said in a voice like grinding stone. This is War Leader Grextok of the Korthak raiding fleet. You will withdraw immediately or be destroyed. This world is under our protection. Jake almost laughed at the twisted logic. This is Captain Morrison of the USS Tempest. You have exactly 30 seconds to release your prisoners and surrender, or we will remove you by force. Grextok's scarred face twisted into what might have been a smile. You dare threaten me, small ship? We are the Korthak. We have conquered 1,000 worlds and enslaved 1,000,000 beings. Your pitiful vessel is no match for our power. 20 seconds, Jake said calmly. You will die screaming human. Your crew will serve us as slaves, and your ship will be melted down for scrap metal. 10 seconds, Grextok snarled and cut the communication. A moment later, the Korthek ship opened fire with everything it had. Plasma bolts and energy beams streaked across space toward the USS Tempest, lighting up the darkness with deadly colors. "Shields up," Jake ordered. "Return fire." The alien weapons struck the Tempest's shields with tremendous force, but the human ship barely shuddered. The energy barriers that protected it had been designed to handle the radiation and particle storms around Earth's sun. Alien plasma weapons were dangerous, but they were nothing compared to the fury of a star. "Shields at 97%, reported Carl Davis. "Their weapons are not as powerful as they look." "Show them what real weapons can do," Jake said. "Fire all railguns." The USS Tempest's response was swift and terrible. 6 magnetic accelerators fired tungsten rods at 30% of light speed. The projectiles had no warheads because they did not need them. At that velocity, a piece of metal the size of a telephone pole carried more energy than a nuclear bomb. The Korthek ship shields lasted exactly 3 seconds against the kinetic bombardment. The first rod punched through the barrier like it was made of tissue paper. The second rod tore a hole in the alien ship's hull that vented atmosphere and bodies into space. The third and fourth rods disabled the main engines, leaving the massive vessel drifting helplessly. "Cease fire," Jake ordered as escape pods began ejecting from the crippled ship. "Damage report on the enemy vessel." Amy worked at her station, scanning the Korthek ship with their sensors. "Main engines destroyed, weapons systems offline. Life support failing in several sections. They're finished, Captain." Jake nodded grimly. The battle had lasted less than 2 minutes, but that was how human weapons worked. They were designed by a species that had learned to kill efficiently or die trying. Every human ship carried the concentrated violence of a world that had never shown mercy to the weak. "Sir," Amy said, looking up from her console, "I'm receiving a transmission from the planet. The Zilani are asking if we're the reinforcements they requested." Jake looked at the tactical display showing the burning Korthek ship and the thousands of prisoners still trapped on the surface. The real work was just beginning. While the crippled Korthek ship drifted in space above the planet, Captain Jake Morrison turned his attention to the thousands of prisoners still trapped on the surface. The enemy had been using the colony as a staging ground for their slave operation, and Jake knew that the remaining Korthak forces would not give up their captives without a fight. "Rodriguez, patch me through to Sergeant Parker," Jake ordered. "It's time for a ground mission." Sergeant Lisa Parker was already suiting up in the Marine Bay when the call came through. She had been a soldier for 12 years before joining the space program, and she knew that the real battle was just beginning. The woman from Texas had fought in 3 different wars on Earth, and she understood that defeating an enemy in space was only the first step. "Parker here, Captain," she said, checking her rifle and ammunition. "We need to get those prisoners out, Sergeant. How many Marines can you take down there?" Lisa looked around the bay at her squad. 12 soldiers, all of them veterans who had volunteered for the dangerous job of exploring the galaxy. They were not the biggest or strongest humans, but they were the smartest and most experienced fighters that Earth could send to the stars. 12 including myself, sir. "We're loading into drop pods now," Jake nodded. The drop pods were another piece of human technology that most aliens considered insane. The idea of putting a person inside a metal box and firing them at a planet from orbit was something that only a species from a death world would consider normal. "Be careful down there, Parker. We don't know how many Korthek forces are left on the ground. Don't worry about us, Captain. We've handled worse than this." Lisa sealed her helmet and climbed into her drop pod. The small capsule was barely large enough for one person, but it was built to survive a fall through any atmosphere and protect its passenger from impacts that would kill most living things. The pod's heat shield could handle temperatures hot enough to melt steel and its shock absorbers could cushion a landing that would flatten a normal vehicle. "Drop pod bay, this is Parker. All Marines ready for deployment." "Copy that, Sergeant," came the reply from the ship's launch control. "Pods. Away in 3, 2, 1, launch." The 12 pods shot out of the USS Tempest like bullets fired from a gun. They streaked through space toward the planet below, their small size making them difficult targets for any remaining Korthak weapons. Within minutes, they were falling. Through the atmosphere of Kepler 442b, their heat shields glowing white-hot as they cut through the air. On the planet's surface, the remaining Korthak forces watched in amazement as the human pods fell from the sky like shooting stars. War leader Thakmer, who had been left in charge of the ground operation, had never seen anything like it. Most species use shuttles or teleportation to move troops from ship to surface. Only madmen would fire themselves at a planet in metal. "Boxes, what are those things?" asked one of his warriors, pointing at the falling pods. "I don't know," Thakmer replied, "but shoot them down before they land." The Korthak opened fire with their energy weapons, but the pods were moving too fast and were too small to hit easily. Most of the shots missed completely, and the few that connected barely scratched the human heat shields. Within seconds, the pods were slamming into the ground around the colony with impacts that shook the earth. Veltar and the other Zelani prisoners watched from their holding pen as the strange metal objects crashed down around them. Smoke rose from the impact craters, and for a moment, everything was silent. Then the pods opened with sharp hissing sounds, and the humans emerged. The sight of the human soldiers was almost as shocking as their method of arrival. They were smaller than the Korthak, but moved with a fluid grace that spoke of perfect training and long experience. Their armor was black and gray, designed to blend with shadows, and their weapons looked deadly in a way that was hard to describe. "Contact front," called out Corporal Ryan Mitchell as he spotted the first group of Korthak warriors. "Multiple hostiles, 200 meters. The battle began immediately. The Korthak opened fire with their plasma weapons, sending bolts of superheated energy toward the humans. But the soldiers from Earth were already moving, using their drop pods as cover while they returned fire with weapons that made sharp cracking sounds. Lisa Parker crouched behind her pod and watched as her squad deployed, exactly as they had been trained. Each Marine knew their job and did it without hesitation. They moved like a machine made of 12 parts, each one supporting the others in perfect coordination. "Williams, take Jones and flank left," she ordered into her radio. "Mitchell, you and Garcia go right. Everyone else, suppressing fire on my mark." The human weapons were different from anything the Korthak had faced before. Instead of energy beams, they fired solid projectiles at incredible speed. The bullets could punch through the aliens' natural armor and kept going, often hitting multiple targets with a single shot. The Korthak, who were used to enemies that matched their slow, powerful fighting style, found themselves facing opponents who moved like lightning and struck like thunder. "These humans fight like demons," one Korthak warrior shouted to his leader. "They're everywhere at once." Thakmer snarled and fired his heavy plasma cannon at a group of advancing Marines. The weapon could melt through a foot of steel, but the humans simply scattered and came at him from 3 different directions. Before he could reload, they were on him, their smaller weapons chattering like angry insects. The battle lasted less than an hour. The Korthak were tough and experienced fighters, but they had learned their skills fighting other slow, heavily armored species. The humans fought like predators from a world where hesitation meant death and second place meant extinction. Dr. Helen Carter arrived on the second wave of shuttles, along with supplies and medical equipment. The doctor was a small woman with gentle hands and a kind smile, but she moved through the battlefield without fear. She had served in field hospitals during Earth's last war, and she knew how to treat wounded soldiers while bullets flew overhead. "Sergeant Parker," she called out as she began examining the freed prisoners. "Some of these people are badly hurt. They need medical attention right away." Lisa nodded and keyed her radio. "Captain Morrison, this is Parker. We've secured the colony and freed the prisoners. The Korthek ground forces have been neutralized. Any casualties on our side? 3 wounded, none critical. The enemy put up a good fight, but they weren't ready for us." Veltar approached the human sergeant slowly, his blue skin pale with shock and amazement. He had watched the battle from beginning to end, and he still could not believe what he had seen. The humans had defeated an enemy that his people could not even imagine fighting. "Your soldiers," he said quietly. "They move like they were born for war." Lisa removed her helmet and wiped sweat from her forehead. Her brown hair was matted with perspiration, and her face was streaked with dirt, but her eyes were calm and professional. "Where we come from, sir, everything is born for war. We just learn to be better at it than anything else." In the days following the battle, the Zilani colonists slowly began to understand what kind of beings had answered their distress call. The humans worked alongside them to repair the damage caused by the Korthek raid, but every interaction revealed how different these rescuers were from any species the galaxy had known before. Dr. Helen Carter set up a field hospital in the colony's main square, treating both Zilani civilians and the few Korthek prisoners who had survived the battle. Her gentle manner and professional skill helped ease the fears of the wounded colonists. But they could not help noticing things about her that seemed impossible. When a heavy beam collapsed during the cleanup, blocking the entrance to the medical building, Dr. Carter simply walked over and lifted it out of the way by herself. The beam would have required 6 Zilani working together to move, but the small human woman handled it like it weighed nothing at all. She did not even seem to notice that she had done something remarkable. "How is that possible?" whispered Zaralin to Commander Veltar as they watched the doctor work. "I don't know," Veltar replied, his voice filled with wonder and confusion. "None of this makes sense." Chief Engineer Pete Jackson was even more puzzling to the colonists. When he suggested reinforcing the colony's buildings to withstand future attacks, the Zilani did not understand what he meant. The idea that homes and schools might need to survive military bombardment was completely foreign to a people who had never known war. "On most worlds," Pete explained patiently, "you build things to be pretty and comfortable. On Earth, we learn to build things that can take a beating and keep working. A hospital that falls down in the first attack can't help anyone." The human engineer showed them how to add steel supports to their delicate stone buildings and how to install backup power systems that could run even if the main generators were destroyed. Every improvement he suggested came from hard experience with a world that never stopped trying to break everything humans built. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez spent her time helping to restore the colony's communication systems, but she also shared stories of Earth's history that left the Zilani speechless with horror and amazement. She spoke casually of world wars that had killed millions, natural disasters that had wiped out entire cities, and diseases that had nearly destroyed the human species. "We didn't have a choice," Amy explained to a group of Zilani children who had gathered to hear her stories. "Our planet taught us to be tough, or we would have gone extinct like the dinosaurs did." "What are dinosaurs?" asked one of the children, a small girl with bright blue eyes. "Giant lizards that used to rule our world," Amy said with a smile. "They were bigger and stronger than anything alive today, but they couldn't adapt when things changed. We humans learn to adapt to anything." The Zilani adults listened to these stories with growing amazement. Earth sounded like a nightmare. World where everything was designed to kill its inhabitants. Hurricanes that could flatten cities, earthquakes that could swallow mountains, and predators that hunted in packs like the humans themselves. It was hard to understand how any intelligent species could have evolved in such a place. Captain Jake Morrison walked through the colony with Commander Veltar, examining the repairs and discussing the future security of the settlement. The human captain moved with the easy confidence of someone who had faced danger so many times that it no longer frightened him. "We'll leave a small security team," Jake explained. "Just enough to help train your people and watch for trouble. The galaxy is a dangerous place, and peaceful worlds need to be ready to defend themselves." Veltar stopped walking and turned to face the human captain. "I must ask you something that has been troubling me. Your people, your technology, your methods of fighting, they are unlike anything we have ever encountered. What kind of world creates beings like you?" Jake was quiet for a long moment, looking up at the peaceful green sky of Kepler 442b. "Earth is what your scientists would call a Class 12 death world. The gravity is twice what most species can handle. The weather can kill you in minutes if you're not prepared. The animals, the plants, even the bacteria are all trying to survive by killing everything else. How do you live in such a place?" "We don't just live there," Jake said with a slight smile. "We conquered it. Every human alive today is descended from survivors who were tougher, smarter, and more determined than everything that tried to kill them. We didn't ask to be warriors, but our world made us that way." The implications of this revelation spread through the colony like ripples in a pond. The humans had not developed their incredible abilities through genetic engineering or advanced technology. They had been shaped by millions of years of evolution on a world so hostile that most galactic species would consider it uninhabitable. Sergeant Lisa Parker worked with a group of young Zilani volunteers, teaching them basic self-defense techniques. The lessons were frustrating for both teacher and students because the colonists had no natural instincts for combat. They had to learn everything from scratch, starting with concepts as simple as how to make a fist properly. "The important thing to remember," Lisa told them, "is that you don't fight to hurt someone. You fight to protect the people who can't protect themselves. Every human child learns that before they learn to walk." One of the students, a young male named Kethran, raised his hand. "Sergeant Parker, do all humans know how to fight like you?" Lisa thought about the question carefully. "Not exactly like me, no. I'm a professional soldier. But every human learns to defend themselves and their families. On Earth, the ones who couldn't fight didn't survive long enough to have children." As the USS Tempest prepared to depart, leaving behind a small security detail to help the colonists, Veltar realized that the galaxy had changed forever. Word of the human rescue would spread throughout the Federation, and with it, the knowledge that Earth's children were unlike anything the civilized worlds had ever seen. "Will we see you again?" Zaralyn asked Amy Rodriguez as the human boarding shuttle prepared to launch. "Probably," Amy replied with a warm smile. "The universe seems to have a way of putting us where we're needed most. And if you ever need help again, just send another distress call." The USS Tempest jumped back into hyperspace with a flash of blue light, leaving the Zilani colonists to contemplate their rescue. They had sent an SOS expecting peacekeepers, but instead had received something far more dangerous and far more effective. They had been saved by Deathworlders, and the galaxy would never be quite the same. The surviving Korthak prisoners carried a different message back to their clans when they were eventually released. They spoke of the humans with a mixture of fear and respect, warning other raiders that some prey was simply too dangerous to hunt. The children of Earth had announced their presence in the galaxy, and they had done so with the quiet thunder of controlled violence that marked all apex predators. In the end, the Zilani learned that sometimes the most effective peacekeepers were those who understood war better than anyone else. They had called for help and received it from the most unlikely source possible. A species that had been forged in the crucible of a world that showed no mercy to the weak, but had chosen to use their strength to protect those who could not protect themselves.